Welcome to the Swing Left Nebraska podcast that's all about energizing communities, advocating for change, and making a difference in the great state of Nebraska. We'll dive deep into the heart of Nebraska's progressive movement, exploring the stories, strategies, and initiatives that are shaping the political landscape. We're here to amplify the voices of candidates, local activists, and community leaders who are fighting for a more equitable, inclusive, and prosperous Nebraska. Swing Left Nebraska is your go-to resource for staying informed about key issues, upcoming elections, and how you can get involved. Whether you're a seasoned organizer, a concerned citizen, or someone who's looking to make a difference for the first time, we've got you covered. Get ready to be inspired, and let's embark on this incredible journey together. Hello, my name is Leah. Welcome to the Swing Left Nebraska podcast, the go-to audio hub for progressives in the Cornhusker State. Whether you're a seasoned activist or new to the political scene, we are grateful you took time out of your day to tune in. Join Cindy and I each week to unpack the unicameral and the issues affecting our communities and uncover the paths towards a more inclusive and progressive Nebraska. A lot happened this past week in the unicameral, so let's do a show. All right, Sydney, this is a unique episode today because we're recording on Thursday, but we still have lots of happenings that will be going on Friday. But let's just do a brief bird's eye view over the last week. Now, I know today, as we record on this Thursday, February 1st, you went down to the Capitol to testify on some bills. But before we get into that, can you break down what happened starting on Tuesday, some of the highlights, and then Wednesday, and then we'll finally wrap up with what your day was like today and then what we can expect tomorrow. So, what are some highlights that stick out to you as far as bills that were presented on Tuesday?
I am so glad to be here with you tonight and talking with you about what's been happening at the legislature this week. And on the floor of the legislature, the main focus has been Senator Jacobson's bill. They've been debating it. It's actually a filibuster that's been happening between the Republicans. So it's been an interesting development to watch filibuster happening between friendly kind of filibuster between colleagues on the Republican side. But Senator Jacobson brought a bill that would require train crews of at least two individuals for these large trains. They did have an amendment that carved out exceptions for some really small kind of trains or what sounds like the trains that have a route that's on a closed track. So these are the ones though that are like miles long. And there's a lot of concern about safety. Of course, we've seen accidents in other states, that horrible one in Ohio, but there have been really deadly train wrecks and crashes here in Nebraska as well. And so Senator Jacobson brought this bill. It is contentious. Union Pacific is basically the main organization that would be impacted. They have been working with their union and coming to some agreements, but there's a push to pass this law and make it codify that there would need to be at least two individuals on all of these trains. And there's a lot of senators that are trying to push this off onto the federal government. Like Senator Linehan mentioned a few times that Pacific is one of the largest property taxpayers in our state and just such a premier company in our state, an employer. And obviously, all those things are true. But we also want to make sure that our communities are safe and that these trains have crews that would be capable of taking care of anything that happens. And I didn't realize Senator Jacobson was saying that, or one of the senators had mentioned that these trains are so long that if you're on one end or the other, it takes one employee like hours to get to the other side. It is a good idea to have more crew there to just basically keep everyone safe. The Republicans have been filibustering on this, and it looks like on Friday, tomorrow, it's first up on the agenda, and they will have, you know, used up all those 8 hours at some point tomorrow.
Why do you think they were
So
filibustering?
I'm sure it has to do with their relationship with their supporters and donors. They're in a very large presence regarding our economy here in our state. And it's difficult to have some senators who are trying to represent their district and the safety concerns that they have back home. And then in Lincoln, sometimes you'll have colleagues who are more focused on that kind of business piece of it and not wanting further regulations. So it's interesting to see this play out among the Republicans. So that's what's happening basically this week in the legislature. They've done some other bipartisan type of things. They've been moving along with some pretty not controversial type of items. Senator Conrad has been sponsoring Senator Breezy's bill from last year that was to provide for year-round daylight savings time. I think most people agree that we want to go to a year-round standard of time where we're not switching back and forth. It's just really difficult for businesses, families, you name it. The kind of debate is that Senator Breezy's bill was to go to year-round daylight savings time and Senator Erdman that would basically say, no, we're going to go to year round standard time, which I agree with. And actually, that is supported by the American Medical Association and all the sleep experts and people who study kind of safety and productivity as far as businesses. But there is what I read somewhere, there's some opposition to year-round standard time from organizations that have to do, like, with some recreation, broadcasting, I think, is one of them as well, where they would prefer we go to daylight saving time year-round just because that would impact their business. So, it'll be interesting to see which way they go. They've been really debating that for many hours as well. I don't know how far along they are into the 8th, though. I haven't been following it that closely, so it'll be interesting tomorrow to see what happens.
Yes, that will be interesting to see what happens, and that will be Friday, February 2nd. That is going down. So, tell us what it was like for a day of being Cindy Maxwell-Osdiek at the Capitol. You had a busy day from morning to evening. You were going into different hearings. I think our audience would love to hear what that all entailed.
I'm sure I hadn't had a chance to go to Lincoln earlier in the week. There were some really interesting hearings this week. I think it would be great if people wanted to take a look at our YouTube page to catch themselves up with the hearings that were taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday. There were some really interesting bills. The ones that I really were excited today to attend, I couldn't get there till more around the lunch hour. I was intending on stopping by and seeing someone earlier today, but I was here in my home office with my husband. We work from home and we're making sure to record the legislature and live stream the broadcast from Nebraska Public Media to the Legislative Study Group YouTube page. We do that for the floor debate and then all of the hearings. And today there were two hearings at noon. That was in the Nebraska Retirement Center and Exec Board. And then on 1:30, there were 6 hearings in appropriation, government, military and veterans affairs, health and human services, judiciary, natural resources, and revenue. And what was interesting, first off, about revenue is that this morning, Senator Linehan, who's chair of the Revenue Committee, made an announcement that she was going to change the format at the hearing, and that since they had so many bills, I think it was like 10 today, they were going to limit the total time of testimony on each bill to 1 hour. And then if someone came and wanted to testify but was not able to within that hour, then they would hold the hearing open at the end for anyone who wanted to testify. That was interesting, and I was concerned initially because it makes me think, and it's reminiscent of last year when they had hearings where they closed off testimony total before everyone had a chance to testify, and they actually sent people home, me included. There were 500 of us who had tried to testify on 574, 575, and 626. But I did appreciate Senator Linehan made a point to say that they would hold it open at the end if for some reason the testimony went over an hour on a bill, they would let someone come back to say their piece. And of course, who can do that? You've got kids and work and jobs, and it's difficult to really plan your day like that. But I did appreciate that she was keeping it open. So that was an improvement from last year. The hearing I went to at noon was an exec board, and I did not testify, but I did sign on as a proponent to both bills. Senator Wayne had a bill regarding transparency of state officials and state employees when they testified before the legislature. And Senator Michaela Cavanaugh had a bill that would require public contractors to provide records to members of the legislature. So basically, that transparency piece and making sure that we wouldn't have difficulty in getting whatever records or information the senators need so that they can either hold the administration accountable or try to craft better laws. So I appreciated both of those bills. I stopped by Military and Veterans Affairs and signed on to the committee sheet there as an opponent for Senator Aguilar's bill. He had one that was to adopt the Firearm Industry Non-Discrimination Act. And basically, what it would do is require companies who want to do work with the state to sign on that they would not discriminate their business practices to not work with companies regarding weapons manufacturers and firearm industry. The difficulty with that is that we have a free market our country and in our state. And I can't imagine that's doable to make these companies sign these pledges, basically. If there's a company that doesn't want to do business with the firearm industry, it really shouldn't affect their work as service providers to our state or partners with the state. So I opposed that bill. And then I went to Health and Human Services, and there were some really good bills in Health and Human Services today. My Senator Von Gillern had introduced a bill that has to do with data. The information from our Health and Human Services Department about cancer statistics and incidences across the state. There are researchers that have regularly had access to this information. And for some reason, in kind of an abrupt way, it seems in the past year or so, that information has just been not available. Like they're not responding from HHS. They're not replying to questions or requests for information, or just really a black hole of information there. And the reason it's important is not only because these researchers are trying to look at issues regarding overall safety here in our state, as far as these cancer locations where people are having these various cancers, but it also impacts our ability to attract research and investment to our state. And there is a registry of research standards across this country, and we have been downgraded from gold to silver in the last year here in Nebraska. And this could really impact with the university and other types of things for our economy. So it's not only the right thing to do, they should be sharing this information, but it's also good for business. And I just want to make sure and mention that the scientists and the researchers and the professionals that spoke on this particular bill, and it's number 1172. One of them is Amanda McGill Johnson. She's a previous senator from Lincoln who now lives in Omaha. And she's a Millard School Board member, actually. And she works with an organization that works in this research space. And basically, when you have this information that is coming from the administration, it is not identifiable. It's aggregate information or anonymous information. And so there really isn't any concern that any of the information that's shared would be like your private data because HIPAA still applies. I hadn't looked into that bill at all. I listened to the hearing and I was very pleased. I think it was a very good piece of legislation for him to bring. And I hope that they can work it out. Like, I wish that there wasn't a need for a bill like this, that the administration would just comply and provide the service, but it's not. I'm glad that we have a way with our laws to compel. Then the last bill, and the reason I went today to actually testify was on LB 952, which was Senator Day's bill to require the Department of Health and Human Services, a theme, to implement the federal summer electronic benefits transfer program. And that's the summer EBT for students so that they can have food during the summer when they're not in school. And it's really well known. I think a lot of people are confused as to why the governor would refuse those $18 million for our state. Those, of course, are our tax dollars that we want to bring back home. And it's really just the moral thing to do is to make sure that our children in Nebraska have enough food to eat and that we do it in a way that helps parents to really make sure that their kids aren't hungry because they're being required to go to some like off-site location that's difficult in the rural areas. Or even if you think about here in Omaha or Lincoln or some of the larger cities, people are at work and their kid might be at home. And if you don't have transportation to get to these off-site nutrition centers, then it doesn't do any good. And so these EBT dollars, and they're only $40 a month, so it's not as much as I think we all would wish, but those $40 can really go a long way when you're wanting to make sure that your children have enough food to eat. So there were a lot of us there today to ask the Health and Human Services Committee to advance that to general file. Let's get it passed. Hopefully, it would pass with such a margin that there would be no need for the governor to veto, or if he did, then they could hopefully override it. And really, let's just get on to finding other solutions for our state because it's really wild that the legislators are having to spend this time basically requiring the administration to do their job. Anyway, that's what was happening at the Capitol today, and on the way home was listening to some of the testimony and revenue regarding tax bills, and one of them was regarding exemptions for sales tax on service, and there were many people who were talking from various different industries, including agriculture, and how it would impact, say, with their repair and parts for their agriculture equipment. It used to be taxed and it has been exempt. It's really hard to imagine going backwards that way and the impact it would have on our farmers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these tax bills. There's a lot of different ways they're trying to come at property tax relief, but we need to make sure that we're not reducing our revenues to the point where we won't be able to meet the needs of our communities. And if we cut too deep, then it'll be difficult if we go into a downturn. And then what kinds of programs and services and obligations will we not be able to fulfill? The thing that is really important for everyone to remember is that, for example, here in Millard, we had a levy override several years ago, and then we actually did it again last year. And the reason we needed to several years ago is because the state did not fully fund the needs for our students. And so we had to go to the residents and raise our own taxes so that we could make sure that the schools had what they needed for our children. I know that Nebraskans believe in public education and providing what we need for our schools and administrators and teachers. And one of the bills in revenue the other day actually would be very difficult because it would cap the ability for local school districts to raise their levy above a certain cap. And it's really difficult to say, okay, if you have a certain cap, then if you have unexpected events that happen, or if there is a growth and needed reason to go above that levy, they want to make sure that there's a way that they can go to the voters and make that case. And I think a hard cap is something that most people just really don't want the legislators to take away that local control. There was a lot of administrators, school board members, superintendents, and other people who specialize in that type of policy that had testified on that the other day.
Thank you so much for going down to the Capitol and always being a wonderful set of eyes and ears for us to bring back the information to share with our audience so we get a real hands on idea of what is actually going on. So, thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm. Yeah, I know there'll be more good hearings next week. One of the things that I'm gonna be watching is education, revenue again, of course, and appropriations have been having their hearings all week, and that will continue next week as well. It's really busy time at the legislature, and I know behind the scenes, they're all trying to work and see how they can balance the various needs for our state along with the resources we have. Let's just hope they continue to work together in a nonpartisan way to try to do what's best for all of us and try to stay away from some of this extremist type of legislation we had unfortunately experienced last year.
Awesome. Cindy, as always, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for being the eyes and ears for us, and thank you for bringing that information back. Any final words for our audience?
I just really recommend making sure to follow the legislature and give your senator a call. If there's a bill that they're debating, or if there's something that's happening in one of the hearings and it pertains to your family or your business, your community, pick up the phone and call. You can leave a message or you can even send an email. But it is really good for them to understand what it is that you are looking for from your senator. They work for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you next week. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Swing Left Nebraska podcast. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in and engaging with us. Remember, every conversation, every vote, and every act of activism counts as we work together to bring progressive change to our state. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite pod platform so you never miss an episode, and share the show with your pals. Until next time, let's mobilize, let's take action, let's go.
Ready, set, go.